So my project was on urban domestic violence. As a social issue, domestic violence is referred to where one part of the family abuses their control in relation to others in the families. Domestic violence mostly impacts women in their lifespan in almost every society worldwide. And the incidence of violence varies from time where it could be chronic or occasional. Most people, when they think of domestic violence, is usually the occasional where women will say their partners occasionally get upset or they can't control their emotions, but that they are not always abusive. So so domestic violence is also described as the strategy of forceful control that people exercise over their partners. And this is an issue because, as we'll see later in the presentation, that um, when domestic violence occurs and violence in the family occurs in general, that it affects the victims and the survivors in all aspects of their life. And I have a purple ribbon here because purple is the color for domestic violence survivors. So continuing on with the social issues, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, many families had to stay indoors for an extended period of time, which raised domestic violence risk because when the world was open, people were able to have at least some type of break where they could leave the home. If that was grocery shopping, going to pick up the children, they had outlets that they could go to get a break from the abuse. But because we had to stay in home to try to protect ourselves from the virus, those risks skyrocketed because people would get stir crazy. They didn't have anywhere to go to release their anguish or anxiety. And so domestic violence increased. And this is a picture of what New York City looks like, which, if you know anything about New York, generally it's people everywhere outside all the time. I am sorry. Sorry about that. So, related to urban, the level of living deteriorated, which resulted into rising crime rates because of the COVID pandemic. People lost their jobs. They didn't have enough money to support the lives that they had. Also, the containment of people in the areas caused high frustration and anger among parents because they could not get out. They could not find different monies to support their families. And so that causes higher frustration and anger, which further led to family violence that people didn't have a place to let their anger out in a healthy way. Also, cases of child abuse have risen because most children are locked in a home with their parents and they don't have school as an outlet like they used to. Also, in the urban area, um, on a better note, theft and hijacking have been reduced because people aren't moving and they aren't about. So that also helped. Policies and programs. So there has been a huge storm of domestic violence and family violence. We know this because there has been an increase in police reports, calls to helplines, and online support services, and the extension of helplines and sharing information to people have been the best policies and programs to help with domestic violence, help people identify what happens and what is happening to them. Because a lot of times people don't realize that they are in abusive relationships, often until they unfortunately get physical and violent. And like the ribbon says, love shouldn't hurt. So some programs, you had Parenting for Lifelong Help, which is a program that teaches better parenting skills, more patience with children, so that the parents um, have ways to work with their children in this stressful time, that they don't resort excuse me, that they don't resort into uh, being a perpetrator of family violence. And then also the 1522 helpline for domestic abuse and stalking. This is what Italy, one of the hardest hit countries of the COVID-19 virus, this is what they use to help their residents during the time. So the strengths of these policies is that they have provided shelters for the affected group, and they've also reduced um, most parents mistreating children, because either the mother or children were able to be removed. And I know that says arrested, but it's not arrested in the way that we think, but to be removed from the house safely, so they have somewhere to go, that they won't have to fear uh, their abuser. So also, the government understood the problems that women fear to report, because women and really people in general, but domestic violence does happen to women a little bit more often, that uh, the government took in account that women fear to report because they rely on their abuser for financial, even emotional and physical help. That is something that they would have to overcome. But also, the policies have helped families to express the issue, and the government did further create policies to help with food for families that did decide to leave their abusers. So the weakness is that it is a challenge for women to report, because they depend on their abuser economically. And also it's a weakness because uh, the children are affected if the mother decides to leave, because the mother doesn't always have the means to support her and the children without the abuser. So some recommendations for change. They are using public strategies and laws that are relegating obligations to civil government, meaning that locally the government has to do something to help the victims. And also successful metropolitan administration uh, expects organizers to look into plans with the help of victims and survivors, so that they can come up with several options to help the survivors. Recommendation continued, you have activity or issues arranged. Uh, is a methodology suggested for expanding the boundary, and also um, demonstrating resolute and managing metropolitan change by creative techniques, meaning that they're just trying to come up with creative ways to help survivors. For the advocacy plan, it should be executed in a dynamic way. That means that it can be changed and fluid depending on the situation, and that people are helping uh, and the best they can. Not, it's not one size fits all, but it's fluid and can be changed when it needs to be. And so the advocacy plan, we are looking for political help, but it's also being mindful that it is still specific to the area, like the 1522 plan that Italy has, that it is something that could be copied on a global scale, but it's still specific to the local area. And these are my references. Right.